Hello, Brian. Welcome to the Carecast. How are you?
I'm good, and thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming. So you've come today to speak to us about memory lane games, which is personalised engagement for dementia patients. Can you tell us a bit more about that and about what it is you do in your product?
Yeah, sure. So the product is an accidental product, if we're honest. The guys originally created it for their own moms. It wasn't created as a business or as a tool. Peter's mother lived next door to him and was a dementia journey. Bruce's mother was living over in Canada, 8,000 miles away. And he was wondering, as Peter's mum got to the stage of only really responding to picture books and photo albums, how he would do that and how he would reminisce with his mum over in Canada. So he built a digital version of that activity. And some months later, it was picked up by a lady called Helen McCaskill. Helen's past is running dementia trials for pharmaceutical companies. And she sort of said, do you boys know what you've got here? And they said, no, not really. It's just something we built for our mums. But that led them to turn it into a product. That led on to a clinical trial of the product that had organised over in the Isle of Man. And that led on to some pretty astonishing things, some pretty astonishing numbers. And that then led us to talk to the NHS in the UK, which was quite hard work, if I'm honest. And that led us to talk to the US, which is where I am today, speaking to you from Boston at an aged care conference with 7,000 people here talking about structured cognitive stimulation and two lunatics in the Isle of Man.
Amazing. What year was it that they came and started doing this for their own mums, Peter? And
about 4 years ago.
Yep.
4 years ago. So Peter's mum, as indeed my own mum, which is how I got involved, has completed her journey of, unfortunately, on Alzheimer's. But Bruce's mum's still with us and features in some of our videos and stuff. He learned the other day in using the game with his mum, he learned the other day about purple starfish and how when she was a child on the beach in Canada, she would collect purple starfish, as well as the therapeutic, as well as the clinical, as well as all the professional stuff. There's some fantastic stories come out of it. It's amazing.
Amazing. And the app isn't just a fun game, isn't it? Is that right? It's backed by science. Tell us a bit about the cognitive impact of using the game.
So two ways of looking at that, really. One, the science, and two, the way it works. On the face of it, it's a simple picture book quiz game. But what it's doing in the background, we now understand, is it's running structured cognitive stimulations. I'll show you a game in a little while, but it shows bright images, good quality images, based on the profile of the individual you've loaded. So you'll load up a profile of where I grew up, where I went to university, where my working life was spent, whether I like cakes or horses or football or baseball or whatever it might be. And the machine then brings all of those content pieces forward. So when I'm looking at a game, I'm looking at a game of images that are familiar to me.
Yep.
And that's stimulating my optical cortex, firing up a really elaborate part of the brain and getting that going. And then we ask a reasoning question based upon the imagery. So if you like, a multi-choice answer. So not a deductive question, not something that you're going to figure out, but something that if it's in your long-term memory, you will know the answer to. So now you're accessing that long-term memory. It's a subject that you're familiar with. It's a game you've chosen, so it's probably a memory that's intact. And then we're reminiscing about that. Picture of Blackpool Tower. Wow, did you ever go to Blackpool? Oh, every summer I went with my family. Oh, who was that? Oh, with my sister and my elder brother. And what were they called? And you reminisce and you talk around that image. And that's driving millions and millions of synaptic connections. And then as that dies away, I don't remember, or I can't remember what we did, or I'm not sure. You just tap the button, as you'll see later, and it brings up the next image and the next question, and you go around that same circuit again. So you're achieving optical stimulation, reasoning, long-term memory, and emotion. And that's the circuit we run.
Obviously, you really want your game to be directed at the individual and their personal memories, experiences, etc. Obviously not of their family and whatnot, but of where they're from or the things they're interested in. Are you using AI or whatnot to gather the questions together and the pictures and responses? Because presumably you don't want to fill the software with preset possibilities, because that'll be a never-ending job. How does that bit happen? Or are you giving away a trade secret if you tell me?
No, it's a quite an interesting one. So a lot of the games have been built by volunteers. So people who have the subject matter expertise. So we've got military games on there, and there's games on military vehicles that were built by ex-Royal Engineers, whatever, because it's that detail. If you're a Royal Engineer and you spent 30 years working on a vehicle, you'll know the details. So you appreciate that. And it's very specific to you. But we were very lucky. We went to a conference in Calgary back in November last year, and we met Google. They've come on board. They've introduced us to some of their friends, and they're helping us to use the power of their know-how to build games more quickly, to build games in diverse languages. We now have games in Spanish and German, we have games in Indian food and street festivals, all sorts of things. But they're also looking to help us do something for those people who are completely isolated and living on their own. And that's a project we're looking at for next year as well. And that will feature AI as a companion. But obviously there's a lot of security and a lot of safety considerations around that. But we've got some great friends helping us.
Amazing. Yeah. I expect Google are looking way ahead, aren't they, really, at becoming the go-to dementia game.
Well, they have resource. There's only 4 of us or 5 of us in the business still, all involved because we had parents or loved ones with dementia. Whereas Google brings just an enormous amount of resource and connection. They actually sent a film crew to the Isle of Man. You can find the film on our website. It was quite funny. There was more film crew than there was staff. But they were so fascinated by what we'd done. They sent the film crew to the Isle of Man to film the 2 founders and some footage of Bruce's mom online and stuff. It's really weird that a brand that big, a company that big, is taking such an interest in a business so small. But it's because of what the app does. The app is really simple, but it's what it does. My own story was I used to run insurance companies for a living. And the boys got in touch with me and said, look, we've been recommended to talk to you about this app, and we understand your mom has dementia. And I said, yeah, but I'm not experimenting on my mom. And they said, no, it's really good, and we'll send it over to you. So I explained that my mum had grown up in Manchester, and they sent me this game on Manchester. Reluctantly, I agreed to go and play this with my mum. My mum was at the point where you could have a conversation, but it was 5 minutes. So how are you? How are the kids? How was your journey? How's the kids? How was your journey? How are you? How's the kids?
Yep.
Around you go. She wasn't having a good day the day I called, but she saw the image on screen and she said, oh, that's Manchester. And I said, oh, that is, yeah, that's right. I grew up in Manchester. I said, yeah, I know, Mum. And 25 minutes later, I was still having a structured conversation with my mom about how she met my dad, the stuff she did in Manchester. She even told me a joke. My mum was back in the room. And I thought, wow, I haven't met this woman for 2 years. So I went outside and shed a few tears, which was quite emotional. And then rang the boys up and said, as you probably figured out, I'm in. Oh, what do you need? And that's all of the people that we do business with, all of the people who've helped us, some of the fantastic friends we have, whether that be US lawyers or UK development people or whatever. They all have a relative. They all have a story of somebody in their family with dementia. And it's allowed us to reach around the world with 4 staff, really, because people are so supportive of what we do.
And how many, and you're obviously testing this out, probably even at greater scale than maybe last year, but how many people are using this at the moment and giving you feedback? And
so we've seen over 100,000 people use the platform in one way or another in various tests. We have a couple of sites in the UK, but the UK has been very slow to adopt this, bizarrely, even though it's our own invention. But we work across 8 states in the US. We work with about 30 organizations in the US using this professionally to deliver to their clients. And then we've got a few hundred families who've downloaded it directly online. But we primarily work through professional caregivers or people who have access to professional caregivers so that we can give them some help and some instruction on what to do with it.
And what's the thought behind using this with professional caregivers? Is it to give them a way to really engage positively and fruitfully with those with dementia? Is that the idea, to almost coach them into really getting a great result from their time spent with the person?
So firstly, it hasn't gone where we thought it would go because the professional caregivers have done different things with it, which is great. So it kind of falls into 3 areas now with the professionals, and that is engagement, what they call here in the US redirection, and family support. So the key to this is the profile. So I went to school up in the Northeast, and then we moved to the South Coast. I'm a Newcastle United fan. So you bring all of that together in my profile, and it would display images that are useful to me. And one of the stories we hear from caregivers, first of all, is that they can relax because they can open the profile, They know it's relevant to the person, willingly engages, and they can spend 15 to 20 minutes where they don't have to think of the next thing to say. They don't have to control the conversation. It's not reliant on them, and they can just relax a bit with the person and reminisce, knowing that they're getting a therapeutic effect from what's going on. Once you've got somebody who engages with the platform and maybe they have a favorite game or a couple of favorite games, it becomes a really powerful redirection tool. So that point of, why can't I go outside, or who are you, or I want to go home, or, and as the anxiety starts to build, we see professional caregivers saying, well, hang on a second, I'm just doing this. What are you doing? And of course, the visual image is on screen. Oh, I know, that's Blackpool Tower. Oh, how do you know that? I went there on holiday when I was little. And their mind is leaving the source of the anxiety and moving across onto the subject matter. And as the questions follow one after the other, they become settled on that train of thought, and they become calm. You see the anxiety subside, and they'll stay in that space for maybe an hour and a half afterwards. So instead of the anxiety building, perhaps becoming a physical thing, with especially some people with young onset dementia, stopping them going out of the house is an issue. So you can redirect them and it becomes a calm piece. That also becomes something that the caregivers can teach the family. So you can take the profile of the caregiver's device, you can recreate it on the family's smartphone or whatever it might be, and teach them how to do that. And we've got some great little sort of tips and tricks videos as well that family can use as well as the professionals. And it's immensely valuable. We get reports back. The caregivers find it almost as beneficial as the person they're caring for.
Yeah.
And of course, then if you can get that into a 15-minute a day regime or a 20-minute a day regime, we've got the findings of the clinical trial. And the mind-blowing statistic of the clinical trial that was run by Hospice Isle of Man, not by us, is the fact that they took a cohort of people who over 6 months, they expected their dementia to decline steadily. And in 92% of cases, saw no decline for the people who were on the program.
Interesting.
So,
what measures were they taking, for example?
They ran it over 6 months, and they took an MMSE assessment, obviously all independent of us. They took an MMSE assessment at the start of the program, halfway through, and at the end of the program.
So
MMSE
assessment is a
mini medical
mental state examination. 30 points there for cognitive impairment.
Yeah, that's the one. So they ran that. Obviously, it was a randomized clinical trial, so we had nothing to do with it. They ran that independently. It was only when they gave us the research back and said, "Here's the findings," that we learned that all we were looking to do with the trial was prove that the device was safe and we weren't doing any harm. But that's been quite something. But it does depend on a daily program of play, 15 to 20 minutes every day, and it's exercise. I know the professionals don't use the phrase, "If you don't use it, you lose it," but all of the families we work with use that phrase. And it's running laps, basically, for your memory.
We don't necessarily know what the mechanism is for slowing the progress of dementia. It could just simply be the reduction in stress and anxiety and all the physiological impacts of stress that are caused by the confusion and the upset and whatnot. And when you reduce that down, that could be what's helping. But it doesn't really matter in a way. It's having a great impact.
You've summed it up beautifully, because when we first came out to the US, we landed in a place called Arizona, and we got picked up by an organization called Mayo Clinic, who are quite a big organization out here, again, resourced. And it was them that explained to us this structured cognitive stimulation theory as to how it's working. And one of their professors was saying to us that the actual methodology, the mechanic of it, might be the 15 to 20 minutes of reminiscence, which if you could do it on similar subjects at the similar time of day, every day, you could build into a program. But what the app does, if you like, is it gives you that track to run on. But it's the socialization. And that's one of the reasons that we're very cautious about the use of AI, because it's that interaction.
Yeah.
And we see some amazing intergenerational interaction. So grandkids who understand the tech and familiar with an iPad and pictures and touchscreen, whilst grandma is familiar with the memory the pictures, and we see that interaction. Yeah, we meet a lot of people who cry because we have a lot of families who say, my daughter didn't want to talk to my mom anymore, found it really difficult and thought granny was a bit weird and all this sort of thing. And now we'll spend 45 minutes when we visit with the iPad reminiscing with granny. In fact, we had a lady say to me, she said, my daughter now knows more about my mum and her first boyfriends than I ever did, because all of this has come out.
Pulling those memories out. It's amazing. Interesting you should say that, because I'm often maybe speaking to siblings who are totally engaged with their parent who has dementia, who are pretty upset that other siblings are just not engaging.
Yeah.
That's the parent. And what I offer up as a possibility is that actually it's so painful for them. They can't do it. They can't find a way to tolerate the upset of seeing their parent like that. And it's not necessarily, obviously, they don't love their parent, care or whatever. They're just unable to bring themselves to engage because they don't really want to see what's in front of them. But actually what's in front of them, potentially with something like this, is a totally different story, isn't it? It's
And we also we get the professional caregivers to give the family some basic tips. If you're a caregiver for a living, this is all stuff. But we see families sometimes say, oh, come on, Dad, you must remember that question. You must remember that answer. And that's just so the wrong thing to say. So we teach them to say, oh, I didn't know that either. Really? I'd have got that wrong. And be on a level. And wherever the conversation goes, just go with the conversation. If Dad is telling you about his time in the desert, don't say, Dad, you've never been to the desert. Just, so what was that like? And how did you end up there? And who were you with? And because every conversation, every thought linked to another thought is really valuable activity. So just take the conversation. The last few months that my mum was with us, she told me all about her time in America on a stagecoach. My mum had never been to America. And it was about 6 or 8 months after she passed away that I was watching on a Sunday afternoon in the UK. I was watching Annie Get Your Gun, a black and white movie. And there was the storyline laid out in front of me. And she'd taken that and put herself into that role. And that was her memory. But it was fascinating to listen to the overnight in the town that they got stuck in and all this. It was amazing. But it was conversation. It wasn't this looped conversation of this sort of ever-decreasing circle of doom.
Yes. How are you? How are the kids? Just the initial bit of a conversation, but then it stops. You mentioned that as a tool for carers to totally change the dynamic of a situation, if someone's getting upset or whatever, to distract and to bring down stress levels or whatever. What about particular things that can make it really difficult for family members or living carers, for example, to support someone, which is sundowning? How does your tool interact with that?
Yeah, I've got to be careful not to make it sound like some sort of magic bullet.
No.
It's a simple app, but the results we see on Sundowning are phenomenal. So if you have a typical behavior, a repeated behavior, and if you can get the profile to a point where they have a favorite game or a favorite subject, and you can start to engage that subject before the behaviors kick in, then often you can offset them. I'll show you the website resources at some point. And in fact, let me just see if I can share screen now. This is the website. And what you can see here is there's a feature of the video that Google sent their film crew to make.
Yep.
But for the professional caregivers, the valuable stuff is probably in here. So if you go into the menu and you scroll down to more information, clinical trial and case studies. So if you go into this section of the website, you'll find 2 things that I think your professional audience will be really interested in. So first of all, you can get here the summary of the clinical trial that was run in 2022. And that's the hospice trial in the Isle of Man that I mentioned earlier. But also on here, there's a case study. And you talk about sundowning. This was an individual who had a very traumatic experience in their past, and their sundowning behavior was to revisit it. And what you have here is a case study that shows that work being done, being tracked through, and a reduction in the antipsychotic medicine that the individual was on, and a major improvement.
Brian, who was working with the client on this case? That it was a family member or a carer or
No, so this
psychologist?
was care staff in a residential unit supported by our head of clinical.
Yes.
So that's on the website. And as I say, also on the website, you can find the RCT trial as well.
So just the acronym RCT is the
Randomised clinical trial.
Yeah.
So we had to, in order to conduct that trial, we had to complete an ethics statement. We had to have an independent review body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's other people testing the outcomes of the app independently of us and in a controlled environment. So the same sort of thing you do for a drug trial.
Yeah.
A small one, by the way, because they're mega expensive to run, but independent of us all the same. And it's opened some amazing doors for us.
That is quite something, because I know probably billions gets put into developing drugs in the hope that they're maybe going to have statistically significant results, and maybe some of them don't necessarily have that, despite probably.
Well, we've talked to Arizona State University about repeating the trial here in the US, and they can do that for us. We just need to find $2.8 million to make it happen. So if any of your viewers have $2.8 million down the back of the sofa, please let me.
Interesting. Let's have a think about that.
Would it be of interest how the game looks on screen?
Yes, let's do another screen share and let's dig in
Okay.
and do it. But by the way, can anyone come to the website and use this or test it? No.
So you can come to the website and you can play sample games, but also if you get in touch with us, and we'll put the email out at the end, we can send you a demonstration access. Or if you want to look at what we call the retail app, which is not as good as the professional app, you can download it for a free trial on the App Store as well. So the games are always the same, and they need to be the same, obviously, to achieve the structured cognitive stimulation pattern. So the games work on the basis, this is one on Rochester, New York. And the reason that I picked this is because it's not a game on New York. And when you build somebody's profile out, you want to get as specific information as you can. So if you grew up in London, you personally wouldn't say you grew up in London. You'd say you grew up in Bow or Chelsea or whatever. And the more specific we can get the images to your past, the more powerful the effect of the reminiscence. So, but they all work on the same theory. So you have an optical stimulus, which is the image. And this one, for example, is what lake is Rochester situated on? I have no idea, but I'm going to guess it is Lake Erie. Okay. And I've gotten that wrong. And what you see there is there's no red cross. There's no challenge to be getting wrong. It just simply disappears. And that's what the professionals call errorless learning. We don't want to tell you that you're wrong. We just want to reminisce. So, wow, I would have thought that was that as well. So we'll go for that one. There you go. Shows you my knowledge of the US is not great. And then again, you get a second image, because the images are firing off far more thoughts in your mind than the conversation will. And you'd reminisce about that, about whether they'd ever been to that place, who did they go with, how old were they when they went there. And as the conversation dwindles off, you just ask the machine for the next question. And again, same format, bright image. So optical stimulation, reasoning question, reminiscence, long-term memory. The game pattern is the same. I should have picked a game I know something about, shouldn't I, really?
Right. Is it, say if I were to set up an account now and put in a certain profile, location, year, etc., would it currently, as the game stands in at its point in development, would it come up with questions tailored to what I've just input?
Yes. The best way to do it is to set your profile up online, so with good Wi-Fi connection. After that, you can run it offline. It doesn't need to be an online setup. So if you have poor Wi-Fi in the home, you can still use the game. So the last thing that we added from advice from the people using it is when you start to use the question, when you start to use the app, you'll get displayed 6 or 8 games on screen, so that the individual with dementia can choose the game they wish to play. And at the end of it, we give that agency back to them, and we ask them whether they liked their game or whether it's not for me. And of course, that feeds into other game recommendations, etc. but it's giving them agency, it's giving them authority and independence over
Yep.
their experience. And all of these small neurological issues really matter.
Question for you. Is there any intent to also sometimes build videos in? I think you mentioned that your mum really remembered, what was it, Annie's Got Your Gun
Yes.
film. Are you thinking actually, let's build in little bits of music and film and things like that eventually? We don't necessarily know what the impact's going to be of that, but is it something that you're going to test out?
It's something that we're looking at. We get asked for music quite a lot.
Yeah.
But there are some very good music apps out there. There are some very good music therapy apps out there, and they do what they do very well. I had a conversation yesterday, actually, at the conference with a neurologist, and they were saying that the difference between what we do is we're trying to direct through optical stimulation and reminiscence. We're trying to direct your memories in a structured way. We're trying to, if you like, give you a bit of a workout. It's a bad phrase, I know, but whereas music is a much more free experience. Music can take you in 1,000 different directions, really. And one of the things we worry about and that we're very careful about is taking somebody down an upsetting path, especially if their dementia is quite advanced. So if it was a song from possibly your spouse's funeral or from something that was very sad in your life, if you get into that thought pattern, it might be quite difficult then to bring you back out. So we're very wary, we're very careful with that. We're very aware that we're dealing with vulnerable adults. So obviously there's no advertising on the app, there's no interruptions, there's no internet stuff goes on it. Very careful with that. And we're very careful to iterate very slowly. So if we go down those routes, it will be 12, 18 months away because we'll want to test them in really rigorous conditions first. What's quite likely to happen, though, is we might do some work in and around things like Parkinson's, because people who we've introduced the app for use in dementia are coming back to us and saying, we're seeing really positive responses in terms of the symptoms around Parkinson's, so tremors and this one. And that is leading us down that road. I know Mayo Clinic would like us to do some work around stroke and stroke rehabilitation. And we know there are a lot of families with children using it in and around autism. So I think what we'll probably do before we take on new stimuli and experiment with them, what we'll probably do is experiment with our existing platform in other conditions, because it's doing something very powerful. And at the moment, we only understand about 10% of that.
Interesting, isn't it? But if it works, just keep doing it.
I should also say, we do get families come back to us or professional caregivers. So I tried it with so-and-so and it didn't really work. And it's not going to work for everybody. We tend to find if we go back to the profile, work harder on the profile. And by the way, if any of your viewers take on the program and the content they need isn't there, don't accept that the content isn't there. Contact us and we'll put the content in. So, my mum grew up in Cornwall. Okay. Which town in Cornwall? St. Ives. Okay. We'll make that content. We'll put it in the library because that's where the other contents come from, is people asking us for it.
Yeah.
So
I think you mentioned that for the people that have found this incredibly useful, it's been a daily task or a daily exercise that they've done. If you were a carer, maybe a living carer looking after someone, how would you approach what time of day to use your tool, your games, and how long to do it for? Would it be the same time of day, more or less, in the afternoon or later on, or a duration of the time? We're talking 20 minutes, that sort of a thing.
So I certainly wouldn't pretend to prescribe what to do, but I can tell you what others are doing and what they tell us. So what we don't want it to do is we don't want it to displace any physical activity, because physical activity is really valuable. And a lot of people with dementia have a very small window to do that. So we would always ask you to prioritize that. You also don't want to be doing it when they're very tired and very frustrated, because perhaps you've missed the time. So perhaps, as you say, late morning, coming into a lunch break, or in the afternoon as they're starting to settle, but they're not tired. I think that would be something we see a lot of, but also ahead of any agitation. So if around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, my mum used to do this thing of about 4:30, she'd put her coat on and want to go and get the bus. And we had no idea where that came from, by the way. What we'd do there is we'd start a conversation about Doris Day or Kurt Russell or whoever it might be, about 15, 20 minutes ahead of that and
Kurt
take their
Russell.
mind off.
I'm not sure he was in any Scott Young.
Not Kirk Douglas, sorry.
Yeah, look,
There's an
yeah,
app for that. But yeah. And also, if you look at that clinical study, the lady who suffered with the trauma, it came in around tea time. So the
yep,
care staff would bring the app in ahead of that and just take them off in that other direction ahead of the behaviors. But also from the caregiver's point of view, when do you need 15 minutes? When do you need 20 minutes? And just let the machine take the strain. When does that work for you?
yeah,
And the other one I heard, not at this conference, but we were at a conference in all places. And there was a lady who was telling me about, she has a client who is incontinent, not all of the time, but if it happens at night. And she was explaining to me that for years, this would be quite a lengthy process because she'd have to get the lady up, change the bed, get her clean, put her back
yep.
to bed. But she was then, it's going to happen again. It's so embarrassing. I don't want to go to sleep. I'm scared and all this sort of thing. And what she started doing is she started dealing with the hygiene piece and then playing an app on, I think it's a particular type of horse or something that the lady had when she was younger. And now she's putting her back to bed, talking about the horses she had when she was younger and how she used to ride them and all this sort of thing. And she's going to sleep, the caregiver was telling me, she's going to sleep 90 minutes quicker than previously, just because she's settled and she's not in that fear loop of, at the moment I go to sleep, I'm going to wet the bed again and all that sort of thing.
That is a huge cool difference in someone's life, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and we heard a story from a guy whose mum and dad still live in New York. His dad used to be a fireman, and he went through this phase of waking up at night and wanting to go to work. And his wife puts it, yeah, you're 35 years late for work. But what we did was we built content for them around a place called Denver and around his favorite baseball team.
Yep.
And she doesn't challenge the behavior when he gets up. She says, okay, you've got to go to work. I'll make you coffee. But whilst she's getting ready, in theory, she gets him on the game about Denver or playing baseball or whatever from his personal memory. They spend half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever reminiscing. And then she'll say to him, it's 2 a.m. in the morning, let's go to bed. And he happily goes back to bed. The son was saying to me at one point, he'd moved from New Jersey, where he lives with his family. He'd moved back to the family home in Manhattan in order to prevent his dad getting out. And he's now back in New Jersey. So you got this crazy, simple app. It's simple picture book app delivering this simple science, but the outcomes we're getting told, the stuff we get fed back, blows your mind.
Amazing. Where do you see the world of digital healthcare for dementia going, and are we literally just at the beginning, or are we near to the beginning of this whole thing, would you say?
The more I look at it, so I'm at a conference out here in Boston at the moment. There's probably 7,000 people at this conference from all over the US.
What conference?
It's called the Leading Age Conference. It happens every year. And there are probably about 300 firms in the exhibition hall with mainly tech. But what I observe is that the best tech is tech that is tools for people. So, tech that is observing or recording or monitoring, tech that's recording, tech that's putting a tool in the hands of professionals to use, because we still see all of the time family behavior. What did you have for breakfast? Oh, I can't remember. Yes, you remember. When that negative behavior and look, all the individuals thinking was, I don't remember, so I must be crazy. And it just destroys their self-esteem. So you need to take these tools and put them in the hands of professional caregivers who understand the person, who really care. We talk about care workers. These people care. And as people with dementia struggle to retain their faculties and go through that awful journey, they need that care. So I think the technology can enable that. I think it can make it more efficient. I think it can keep a better record of it and educate us. But I think it's the technology in the hands of the caregiver. And that's a phrase they use over here, caregiver or care partner. I think that's when I see it being most valuable. I don't see that being replaced. I don't see us being cared for by robots, if I'm honest.
No, it sort of makes actually everyone into an expert, really, in a way.
Take the best that we can deliver anywhere on the planet and put it in the hands of everybody who's facing that challenge.
Brian, you mentioned that you've experienced the dementia journey with your mum who's now passed away, and you must have met so many families and so many people with dementia throughout the last 4 or so years. What piece of advice would you give to a family who just found out or just noticed that their loved one has dementia? What would you say to them?
So the first thing I'd say is you're not on your own. There are a lot of really good quality communities out there. There is a lot of good advice out there that you can reach out. In the UK, organisations like Together in Dementia Every Day, organisations like Dementia Caregivers Count, companies like yourselves. So reach out and ask for help. When you get those frustrations of how difficult it is, do not feel guilty. Caring for somebody with dementia is really hard work, and you're going to need as much help as you can get. And it's not your fault either. I think we all went through that as a family of, should we have done this? Should we have done that? And unfortunately, at the moment, science doesn't have an answer. And there are things in Mother Nature that we don't yet have an answer to. And we all come into this world one way and we all go out of it one way. So you just got to make the best of that journey. But the other thing I'd probably say is their reality is real. So when my mum was talking about her crinoline dress and the dust from the stagecoach or whatever, that was factual in her mind. Those two stories had been woven together, and she had been to America. She was on that stage. It did happen to her. And therefore, there is nothing to be gained in challenging that reality in everything that I've seen. So, yeah, I think those were probably my observations. But there's a lot of professionals out there know more about me. There's a lot of work going on the causes. If you know anybody with a hearing loss, get them a hearing aid, because hearing loss accelerates dementia like you wouldn't believe. Keep an eye on the diabetes, because that's a major contributor. I think there's 6 or 8 key factors to it. So as you get older yourself, watch those factors, look after your health, stay active, stay physically active, stay mentally healthy, stay mentally active. And as a carer, look after yourself. Because if you're not in good condition, you can't support the person with dementia as well as you should.
Amazing. Thank you. Brilliant advice. How can listeners or viewers access Memory Lane Games, please, Brian? What's the URL?
So the easiest way is if you go to www.memorylanegames.com. Is our website. You'll see that there's a section on there for families. There's a section on there for professionals. Just drop us an email. Drop me an email, brian.hall@memorylanegames.com. And anything I can do to help, we'll do it.
Amazing. Thanks so much for your time, and especially since you're in Boston at a conference. Really appreciate that. Thanks to all our listeners and watchers for viewing and listening. Hope you found the video helpful. Please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel. And thanks for listening in. Cheers, Brian. And have a good day at the conference. And I hope to catch you soon.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers.